Alex is a creative director and consultant, producer, composer, and music technology expert. He has worked with companies such as Cirque du Soleil, Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group, and Dragon. He also owns and operates his own company, iFixYourMix, which is a music consulting business that helps musicians with the production, creation, and branding process. So, everyone, welcome Alex. All right,
Thank you
so
so
to
much for
start
having
off,
me.
would you mind sharing a little bit about how you started in this industry, like your schooling and what your musical background is?
Sure. So let's start with the schooling because I started playing piano when I was, I think, 6 years old, and I really enjoyed improvising. That was the first point of access for me with music. Though I had a repertoire that I was supposed to learn, I didn't really feel like I was connecting with music until I found a way to sort of play things that I was hearing and experiencing. So I had a very, very strong musical urge naturally without having to be shown, how to play stuff. And then later on, I decided to move towards guitar. And that opened up a lot of doors. I felt like the guitar was a lot more, uh, let's say, closer to how a voice could express itself, seeing that you can bend strings and such. Fast forwarding to playing live, I had studied with some guitar teachers and such and learned jazz, and I became pretty good. So I was able to join a jazz ensemble in my 20s. And I didn't formally study at a university at all. My training had a lot to do with the group that I had in Toronto at that time and playing gigs. I had learned through playing piano and studying guitar privately how to read music. But again, my point of access to music was more from the ear, and then the reading was secondary. Then you said something about how I got into the music business. So
Yeah.
I would say, the jazz live performance was the music business. I was getting paid to do it, but the music business proper, like, what people usually expect that to be, which is, you know, labels and all of that stuff, which was basically something that was a viable option at my point in time happened when I first became an assistant to a composer in Toronto, and that's where I learned about production. And so having the knowledge and skills to do production opened the doors to a variety of different ways for me to do music. So one of the ways, of course, was, assisting that composer. Another way was writing music for a documentary, and the company was called Cirque EOS, which was comprised of people from Cirque du Soleil. And that kind of opened the door for me to get involved in the circus arts. And it's funny because I never really imagined myself to be a circus musician, but somehow I kept getting all of these gigs. And I think that's a good way to end your question with the Cirque du Soleil or the Cirque sort of
Yeah.
phenomenon.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of going into like writing a little bit, can you explain a little bit how your creative process works when writing music, kind of either personally or for professional use?
Sure. Um, I hesitate to give you an immediate answer because it's not easy to answer this question. And I know that a lot of aspiring artists sometimes get stuck. And that can be frustrating because we all enjoy listening to great music and we want to be able to express ourselves. And so I have come up with a series of techniques that I utilize in order to get myself in the zone. One of them, which is really, really simple, and if any of you have access to a musical instrument, even, if you're a DJ, getting onto your system and just turning it on and saying, I'm going to do something. It doesn't matter whether it's great or not, but I'm going to do something. So in my case, because I'm an instrumentalist, I'll grab my guitar and you have these backing tracks on YouTube. So I'll just turn on a backing track and just mess around and see what happens. Or if it's a matter of me using my voice, I'll start with maybe some scales to at least open up my vocal cords, and then I'll proceed to maybe singing a song that I know, grabbing my guitar, and then being free to really be silly. And if you've ever seen a Cirque du Soleil show, you might have noticed that there's a language that's used, which is called Cirquese. For people that don't really know Cirque du Soleil, Cirquese is just a vocalic language that doesn't really have any origins from any one country. And so I'll kind of mess around and improvise without using words. The good news about that for us that are inspired to write songs is that that's a great technique. Even Michael Jackson utilized that technique to write songs. A lot of the great songs that were written, George Harrison, I think Here Comes the Sun, a couple of verses were not written, or a couple of stanzas were not written. And so he had like filler words that he would use. And at the beginning, if you see the Get Back documentary, you'll see that some of the lyrics aren't the same. And as long as you kind of get into the flow and the rhythm and put something there, even if it's not perfect, the point is don't be a perfectionist, just get started. That's really how you can get the writing process going.
Yeah, for sure. And then I kind of want to dive into your production experience and kind of walk us through kind of how you started and kind of maybe any advice or tools that students could use to kind of dive into the production world.
Sure. I started with Digital Performer at the time. I'm going to let you know that that was 1999. Prince has a cool song. Uh, I started with Digital Performer, and that was like the best digital audio workstation. It's still a great digital audio workstation. It's very, very niche in the sense that you can do a lot of things that the other ones can't do. And people like Danny Elfman still use it. I use it from time to time. I have some sessions up on it, but I've migrated to Logic and Pro Tools and Ableton. Those are far more popular right now. How I got started, so I had basic knowledge of Pro Tools and of Digital Performer. The reason why I had knowledge of Pro Tools was because I bought a Digi 001, and that was what was available at my local guitar shop. So I kind of tinkered with the free version, and I had seen someone use Digital Performer before, became the assistant to this composer. I was very, very nervous, but I had to perform. And so he trained me for one day. And then the next day he says, okay, I'm going to go in the other room and record some flutes. So you just, press this button, record. And I was like, great, okay, I can do that. And this is how you do the take. So I can do that. And then comes back out, and he did maybe 3 or 4 takes. He was really, really good. He could play giant steps on a bansuri flute. And if anybody doesn't know what a bansuri flute is, it's an Indian flute that has 5 holes on it. And Giant Steps, if you know what that song is by John Coltrane, has many, many key changes in it. And a 5-hole flute is not designed to play giant steps on. So he was able to come up with his own finger patterns to play giant steps on a bansuri flute. This guy was a total genius. Well, he thought that I was maybe close to his genius, but I wasn't. And he said, okay, I'm going to lunch and come back. And when I come back, I want you to find the best takes and edit them. And he hadn't showed me how to edit. And I had 1 hour to figure it out. And I was like, okay. And then he left. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I, opened up the help menu. They didn't have many YouTube videos back then. They had very, very few resources. So you had to really be on your toes and just make it happen. And I kind of made it happen. I didn't know how to nudge things. So I would like cut. I knew how to do that because most programs knew how to cut and paste. And I was like manually with the mouse moving the It was really, I was just rushing and I comped a take. I didn't even know the word comping at the time, but I comped a take and he said that was okay. And then I just kept watching him. I took a lot of notes. I worked with him for about 8 months. And that really got my chops going. Then later on, I became interested in other digital audio workstations. When I started working with Cirque du Soleil, I realized that they used Ableton for live playback and some production as well. And that was a DJ software. And I was very curious about how a DJ software would be used in a live show. And I'm sure now it's pretty much public knowledge that a lot of great artists use Ableton as a playback system. Cirque du Soleil uses it in a way that is very different than how it's built to be used, though the current versions of Ableton now have adopted some of those features that Cirque du Soleil was using 10 years ago. Um, I was privy to the techniques and I've learned how to create a playback system for Cirque du Soleil as a result of working with them and having that experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then kind of segueing that into your company, iFixYourMix, just explain a little bit how you came up with that idea and if you have any advice for students aspiring to start their own company and how that process was for you.
So I was sitting in my studio. I had a studio in LA at the time in my house, and I was at that time I was doing a lot of different gigs in my studio. Some of them were recording for labels and creating music for production libraries. And at times I would have people that would come in for demos. And I noticed that some of the people that came in for demos had Logic sessions or whatever DAW that they were using, and they had some knowledge of how to use a digital audio workstation, but not really enough to make things sound right. And being an avid lover of Apple's products, you have the iPhone, you have iTunes, and I thought, well, I fix people's mixes. I fix your mix. I'm sure it's already taken. I'm gonna see if it's taken. And it wasn't taken. So I was like, wow, that was really lucky. So I immediately bought it. And at the time, it wasn't my main source of revenue. It was just, an idea that I had had. And I kept building upon it. And once I got to San Francisco to teach at the Academy of Art University, I really honed in on the idea of developing iFixYourMix because I had the opportunity to work with a lot of students that were learning how to mix, learning how to produce, and a lot of the questions that I was getting uh, were helpful for me to develop products, I guess, that I could or services that I could provide for customers. And so that's how that developed.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then kind of jumping into because we are all students here at UCF, just kind
Cool.
of giving some like advice you would give to anybody either just entering the music industry or anybody wanting to go into your field, such as like composing or producing.
Yeah. And so the first thing to do is to figure out exactly what you are as a creative person. And so if you're a composer, you need to really dig in and figure out what differentiates you from anybody else that's doing it. Now, you could be a cookie cutter composer and you could say, I need to have a dramatic score and I need to have an action score and I need to have, a cool sounding electronic hybrid score, et cetera, et cetera. And you can go into all of these uh, aspirational activities, but you'll never be original. And the most important thing in anything that you do, whether it's music or any business or any vocation for that matter, is to be original. And so that requires self-reflection and that requires an understanding of why you do just about anything, what motivates you. And by having that sort of approach, what it gives you is it gives you an understanding on your creative process. And I can't emphasize the importance of that enough. What is your creative process? And when someone listens to your music, do they hear your creative process? Do they get inspired? Remember, when you hear an inspiring song, no matter who it is, and remember, we're talking about original inspired songs. Now, if we look at someone like Taylor Swift, who's a very, very highly produced artist that has a team of marketers and songwriters and production specialists that work with her, I wouldn't call her an original artist. Although she's written some songs, I wouldn't call her an artist that's original, right? Now that's not, the composer line, that's the, pop artist line. But if we look at composers, for the most part, composers are able to make a composition with their hands, okay? They can make a composition with any tool that they have. So what I suggest is that you limit yourself first. Take a look at your DAW. Only use 4 tracks. Don't use 500 tracks or, all of these different buses and such. Just use the simplest things and see if you can come up with something from a simplistic approach and then build upon that. That's a really, really good way. I think I kind of digressed and went into a few different directions there, but I hope that I've at least opened up some doors.
No, that was perfect. And at this time, we are going to open up questions for um, members. So I'm going to
Cool.
mute myself and we're going to switch to the other one. So if you
Okay.
guys have
Nice.
questions, they come up here. Or that actually might be better.
Okay.
So they're going to come over here. Does
Cool.
anybody have any questions they would like to ask?
Don't be
Not
scared.
all at once. Do you want to come over here? Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering if you could tell us more about what you do with the iFix Your Mix.
Sure, sure. And I really like your t-shirt. That's really cool, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, so iFixYourMix has branched into a variety of places. So, of course, people send me their sessions and then they're not finished. And what I do is I finish them for them. So that could be mixing it, that could be adding instrumental parts, that could be rearranging it, remixing it, giving them a consultation. So I could listen to it and say, you need to add this, you need to take that out, you need to enhance this, and now it's fixed. So it can be one of those or many of those things combined. So it could be tailored specifically. Now, where I've branched out is that I've also become a consultant for media. So that could be, for example, some of my clients, I help them create a whole series of content, video content and audio content. And that was leaning more towards meditation and mindfulness. And so, as that's one of my passions, is to understand my mind, right? I had happened to have attracted a client that had that as their project, and so they needed a lot of media content, and I helped them choose that and fix their mix of media content. That can also branch out into IT and how a website is presented, whether or not it's meeting within the brand guidelines. I can help create the branding guidelines, or I can help a company uh, follow their branding guidelines if they have an agency that's already determined that. Like, things of that nature are what iFixYourMix do.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
really
you.
cool. I have
Yeah,
one more question also.
sure.
Could you tell us a highlight of your career or like favorite projects you've been able to work on?
Okay, so highlight of my career. This might not sound like a highlight to many people because it was very stressful. But when I did the press conference for Cirque du Soleil in Hangzhou, China, that was one of the most amazing experiences because I was so overwhelmed with difficulty, actually. And I was working with somebody that wasn't really facilitating the project in a way that was making it easier. I think that I said it twice, facilitating and easier. Uh, but just to stress the point, I was given a whole series of stems that were not time stamped, and they were like some of them just had just the bell, but I didn't know where it belonged. And some of them started in the middle, and there were like four different tempo changes and there were a couple of tempo increases, and I had to import them into Ableton, have them play back, have tempos drawn in, and I had to do it all on my own. There had no way of doing it. And it was the most difficult thing I'd ever done. And it was next to impossible. When I told the management and the creative director of the show and all the others that I had done it because I wasn't being given the right information from Montreal because they were busy and such, they were amazed because most of the guys were like, you just needed to just not do that and not make the session fully professionally playable and, mutable. And I'll explain that in a second, but I did it. And what that allowed us to do at the press conference was it allowed us to repeat sections if the acrobats lost their position. And so what makes a Cirque du Soleil playback system robust is that if an acrobat falls and we need more time for the music, and there's live musicians also at the same time. So being the music director of the show at that time, I could, tell the singers to sing another verse or something like that, and then the playback would loop. What I'd done is I had created the opportunity in case that happened to have a loopable or several loopable sections. And so that was definitely an achievement, I would say. Let's say other highlights, touring around Mexico with some smooth jazz artists, with also some Cirque du Soleil acrobats, and another project early on called Dreamscapes. That was a little bit above my skill level because most of the guys were about 20 years older than me. One of the guys played with Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross. He was the bass player, and he was like so hard on me. And, he'd like walk into my room at 6 a.m. and tell me to practice. And like, but those moments made me what I am today. So I'm very grateful and humbled that I had the opportunity and people believed in me. So those would be highlights both on a performance level and on a production and stage theatrical level.
Thank you.
Thank you. What was your name?
Anna,
Anna. Nice to meet you, Anna. Thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Anybody else? Sorry, I'm making everybody stand behind the.
That's cool. It's a good idea. Hey,
Hey, how's it going, man? So I had
nice.
two questions
Good.
for you as well. My name is Blaine. Nice to
Blaine.
meet
Hi,
you.
Blaine. Nice to meet you too.
So my first question is that thinking back to when you were a younger lad in the music industry,
Thanks.
um, when you were trying to find gigs or trying to find opportunities, what was some of your biggest resources?
Oh, okay. Right. Finding gigs. At the time, we would hand out CDs, and I was very persistent. And I would say I would open up. I would say to the manager, I would open up for this band, and play a couple of songs for them. Any night that I thought was a good night, I would approach the club owner or maybe some of the staff. I would try to spark a conversation and be very spontaneous and not be overly confident in the sense rude, but I would know that I had something to offer. Now, I would practice at home a lot, practicing not only how to approach the people, like I would come up with some kind of opening phrase of some sort, but also my performance. So if it was a, singer-songwriter thing, I would know that I've practiced at home enough to be able to do it. Now, with my jazz group, I had a little CD, and I would go to the club, and then I would follow up. I would go there personally to follow up. I wouldn't call, even though you could call, you could text, you could, email. I would go to the club and say, "Did you get my package?" Those are really, really great ways. Being there in person, there's nothing better than that. No matter what, day and age we're in, with all of the technical things we have, showing up is the most important thing.
Nice, thank you. And so my second question would be, what's the difference between a consultant and a producer?
A consultant would be somebody that just gives a few meaningful suggestions on how to improve whatever has been created. A producer is somebody that works together with a team of people or a team of artists to generate content by means of utilizing technology. And in today's age, the producer also turns the knobs. As you can see, I got a couple back there. Uh, and they might even mix the project themselves. If you look at even in the days of George Martin, I mean, he was telling the audio engineer what to do. He wouldn't be turning the knobs. But nowadays, because we have automation and such, and the computers are far more versatile than, having these analog knobs that couldn't remember anything. I think that it gives the opportunity for the producer to have a hands-on approach, not only in, making the project work with a bunch of people, but even if you look at Jay-Z calls himself a producer, but he kind of compiles things and puts things together. Uh, if you look at a lot of great bands, even if you look at Coldplay, for example, they kind of produce their own work too, and they're playing over it. And so that means that they're turning knobs and they're putting things through effects and they're working with a bunch of people. So it's what makes the vibration pop out into your brain. And that's what a producer does.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
All right, we've got our next one coming up.
Oh, cool. Wow. Nice. Got a lot of questions. That's good.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
So, my question is, being in the industry as long as you have, in your position, how do you manage to stay inspired and like evolve in your field?
Well, I try to do things that scare me, and push my fear level out of the box. And so in the past few years, I've been training as a Muay Thai boxer.
Wow.
And that has really changed the game for me, to be very frank. Not only has my music live performance surpassed, I would say, my previous versions of the artist I call Alex. It's also given me more mental focus. So if you're boxing with somebody, there's no room to think about anything else other than the present moment. So that's one technique that I've worked with. Meditation is very useful. You don't need to be, associated with any kind of spiritual or religious discipline to be a meditator. It's scientifically demonstrated that meditation is just being present in the moment and having enough of an awareness of the circus of your mind and knowing where to put it. Rather than letting it dictate all of your whims, and driving the horse, you become aware of the horse itself, and then you can guide yourself in a direction that's more focused. And that is a great way to be inspired. So if you're playing a guitar, if you're singing, it's like walking a tightrope. If you're just singing the notes on the page, do, re, mi, you can go do, re, mi, fa, right? You can really focus on all of the different nuances of where a note goes. And any hesitancy on how you work with a note will completely draw your focus to a place that doesn't receive the response that you might be hoping for. And the response that usually you're hoping for is something where people are either captivated or interested or they're focused, right? So if you're getting that feedback, you know that you're doing a good job. But if you're alone, you might not know if you're doing a good job. So there's certain kinds of techniques like recording yourself or doing a sport or doing some kind of practice, doing scales or doing a song that like I said earlier. Those are great ways to remain inspired. But I have to tell you, I can just do it for hours on end. I can record, I can mix, I can work with different artists. I don't really get tired because I really love doing it. So just find what you love doing in the music industry and you'll be inspired all the time.
Wait, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? You can come up here.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Sophia. I just wanted to get your opinion on what's your opinion on the prevalence of loops and samples being used by producers? For example, like Sabrina Carpenter's song Espresso, it was made by like two splice loops. And like a lot of producers are saying like they made this, but like they're kind of just putting like a lot of loops together. So like do you think like it kind of inhibits creativity in a way or kind of like promotes it in a sense?
So it promotes it when you get a song idea based on a rhythmical prompt. I would call it a prompt, right? And that's what a loop is. It's not original in the sense that it's not the download that you can get when you're in the flow that has nothing to do with an external source, though you might have had, memory input of music because music is a language, right? But it's a different way of creativity. It's not right or wrong. It's not better or worse. But I would say that if you don't create with loops, it's far more involved and there's far more of a momentum that is required to create music without a loop. You still need a pulse or metronome, you need something. Da 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 boom da 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 boom da 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 na 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 ba. There we go. So that there's no loop there, right? But if I had a I might have created that a little bit differently, right? I might have gone in a direction where I would have taken those triplets, something like that, right? So everything affects everything. There's an interdependency based on what inputs are there, right? So just depends on where you want to start and how inspired you are.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Didn't expect to do that.
Let me check. I'm just checking the battery real quick. You're at 22.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay. 22. Magic number.
Anybody else? Not all at once. All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions,
All good. Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind, do you have LinkedIn or any social media where we can connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. You can connect and collect lots of music. You can go to Alex Plays Music on Instagram. It's all one word. You can also go to iFixYourMix, all one word on Instagram. I believe those are the same handles on X, formerly known as Twitter. I really miss the verb to tweet because I don't like to X people because that's kind of like, but anyways, I got some followers I can see now. And you can go to iFixYourMix.com, and there are different social media uh, accessible points there. I also have a YouTube channel. I believe that's also at Alex Plays Music, but you can find that. You can find my iFixYourMix on iFixYourMix.com, but I think it's at Alex Plays Music on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I just wanted to take a moment. I know Danielle mentioned in the beginning to just kind of shout out Grammy U. That's how I met Alex, is through their mentorship program. Really
Nice.
great opportunity. I think their applications should be open for the fall. And then you can either do like remote, that's how I did this mentorship, or you can do in-person ones, but you'll fill out a form and they'll match you with somebody that has similar experiences and stuff. So I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I learned so much from Alex. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you. So
Thank you. My pleasure.
bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye. Thank you, everyone.